Not so did Mazdaism, but struggled on towards unity. The Lord slowly brought everything under his unquestioned supremacy, and the other entities became not only his subjects, but his creatures. This movement was completed as early as the 4th century BCE, nor can it be more clearly traced than in the Amesha Spentas and Mithra. Well, certainly you had certain doctrines and then other doctrines put on top of it, and then certain doctrines and some of the things that were returned. But 7. The Indo-Iranian Asura was often conceived as sevenfold by the play of certain mythical formula and the strength of certain mythical numbers. The ancestors of the Indo-Iranians have been led to speak of the 7 worlds, and that the supreme entity was often made sevenfold, as well as the worlds over which he ruled. The 7 worlds became, in Persia, the 7 Karshvari of the earth, and the earth is divided into 7 Karshvara, only one of which is known and accessible to man, the one on which we live, namely Van Iratha, which amounts to saying that there are 7 earths. Parsi mythology knows only of 7 heavens. Vanratha itself was divided into 7 climes. An enumeration of the 7 Parshvara is to be found in Fargod 29:39. The names and several attributes of the 7 entities had not been as yet identified, nor could they be then, after the separation of the 2 religions. These entities, named Aditya, the infinite ones, in India, were by and by identified there with the sun, and their number was afterwards raised to 12 to correspond to 12 successive aspects of the sun. In Persia, the 7 entities are known as Veshaspentas, the undying and well-doing ones. They, by and by, according to the new spirit that breathed in the religion, receive the names of the deified abstractions, most of which were already known as divine or holy in the Indo-Iranian period. Health and immortality are invoked in the Vedas and in the Avesta. Avesta is revered in the Vedas as Reta. Spenta Armaeta is the Vedic entity Aramata. Kshatra Vairya is the same as the Brahmanical Kshatra. Vahu Mano is a personification of the Vedic Samanta. Vahu Mano, good thought. Asha Vahista, excellent holiness. Kshatra Vairya, perfect sovereignty. Smenta Aram Ite, divine piety. Arvatat and Ameritat, health and immortality. First of them all was and remained Ahura Mazda. But whereas formerly he had been only the first of them, he was now their father. I invoke the glory of the Amesha Spentas, who, all 7, have one and the same thinking, one and the same speaking, one and the same doing, and the same Father and Lord, Ahura Mazda. Yast 29:16. 8. In the Indo-Iranian religion, the Asura of heaven was often invoked in company with Mitra, an entity of heavenly light, and he let them share with himself in universal sovereignty. In the Veda, they are invoked as a pair, Mitra Varuna, which enjoys the same power and rights as Varuna alone, as there is nothing more in Mitra Varuna than in Varuna alone, Mitra being the light of heaven, that is, the light of Varuna, but Ahura Mazda could no longer bear an equal. Well, any being thought of as a partner, you could say, and Mithra became one of his creatures. Thus, this Mithra, the Lord of the wide pastures, I have created as worthy of sacrifice and worthy of glorification, as I, Ahura Mazda, am myself. But the old formula, no longer understood, in which Mithra and Ahura, or rather Mithra Ahura, are invoked in the indivisible unity, dimly reminded one that the Creator was formerly a brother to his creature. Mithra means a friend. Mitra means a friend. Different language, same term more or less. And is a light friendly to man. He preserved, however, a high station both in the concrete and abstract mythology as entity of heavenly light, Lord of the vast luminous spaces of the wide pastures above. He became as the god of the sun, Dio Invicto Soli, Mithra. In Persian, Mehr is the sun. As light and truth are one and the same thing, viewed with the eyes of the body and of the mind, he became as an entity of truth and faith. He punishes the Mithra Drug, him who lies to Mithra, or who lies to the contract, since Mithra is a neuter noun, meaning friendship, agreement, contract. He is a judge in hell, in company with Rashnu, the true one. As a god of truth, a mere offshoot of Mithra in his moral character. Did I say 9 here? 9. Thus came a time when Ahura was not only the maker of the world, the creator of the earth, water, trees, mountain, roads, wind, sleep, and light, was not only he who gives to man life, shape, and food, but was also the father of Tistrya, the rain-bestowing entity, of Verethragna, the fiend-smiting entity, and of Haoma, the tree of eternal life, the father of the 6 Ameshaspentas, the father of all the entities. Well, the progenitor, you could say, maybe. We'd have to look at the etymology and lexicography for that word, right? Yet, with all his might, he still needs the help of some entity of such as free the oppressed heavens from the grasp of the fiend. When the storm rages in the atmosphere, he offers up a sacrifice to Vayu, the bright storm entity who moves in the wind. He entreats him, grant me the favor, thou, Vayu, whose action is most high, her who works in the heights above, that I may smite the world of Angra Mainyu, and he may not smite mine. Vayu, whose action is most high, granted the acts for a favor to the creator Ahura Mazda. And when Zoroaster is born, Ahura entreats Ardve Sura Anahita that the newborn hero may stand by him in the fight. In the same way, his Greek counterpart, Zeus, the entity of heaven, the Lord of the Father of both the entities and the humans, when besieged by the Titans, calls Thetis, Prometheus, and Hecatoncheires to help him. 10. Whereas in India, the fiends were daily driven further and further into the background, and by the prevalence of the metaphysical spirit, entities and fiends came to be nothing more than changing and fleeting creatures of the everlasting, indifferent beings. Persia took her demons in real earnest. She feared them, she hated them, and the vague and unconscious dualism that lay at the bottom of the Indo-Iranian religion has its unsteady outlines sharply defined and became the very form and frame of Mazdaism. The conflict was no more seen and heard in the passing storm only, but it raged through all the avenues of space and time. And evil became a power of itself. engaged in an open and never-ceasing warfare with the good. The good was centered in the supreme entity, in Ahura Mazda, the bright God of heaven, the all-knowing Lord, the Maker, who is the author of every good thing, was the good spirit. Spenta Ma'enu, in front of him and opposed to him, slowly rose the evil spirit, Angra Ma'enu. We will briefly explain what became in Mazdaism of the several elements of the Indo-Iranian dualism, and then we will show how the whole system took a regular form. 11. The war in nature was waged in the storm. The Vedas describe it as a battle fought by Indra, armed with the lightning and thunder, against the serpent, Ahi, who has carried off the dawns or rivers, described as a goddess or as milch cows, and who keeps them captive in the folds of the cloud. This myth appears in a still simpler form in the Avesta. It is a fight for the possession of the light of Havaranu between Attar and Dahaka. Yast 29:47-52. Attar means fire. He is both a thing and a person. He is sometimes described as the weapon of Ahura, but usually as his son, as the fire that springs from heaven, can be conceived either as flung by it or as born of it. Dahaka, the fiendish snake, is a three-headed dragon who strives to seize and put out the Havarano. He takes hold of it, but Attar frightens him away and recovers the light. The scene of the fight is the sea Vauru Kasha, a sea from which all the waters on the earth fall down with the winds and the clouds. In other words, they fight in the sea above, in the atmospheric field of battle. The Havarano, Persian Khurra and Far, is probably the light of sovereignty, the glory from above, which makes the king as an earthly god. He who possesses it reigns. He who loses it falls. Town where Yima perished and Dahaka reigned. As when light disappears, the fiend rules supreme. And what we can deduce from all this is more along the lines of its people's thoughts and what people believed and people did changed, saying that, well, God wasn't content because some priest wrote this period, and but he changed his mind over here because some other priest wrote another book. That doesn't make any sense. 12. The same myth in the Vedas was described as a feat of Tra-Itana, or Trita Aptya, Trita, the son of waters, who killed the three-headed or six-eyed fiend and let loose the cows. The son of waters is both in the Vedas and in the Avesta the name of a fire entity as born from the cloud in the lightning. Now, in the monotheist tradition, some of the things that were done as part of the sacrifices of some of these cows, some of these letting animals loose rituals, wasn't really the son of the waters is both in the Vedas and in the Avesta the name of the fire entity, and is born from the cloud in the lightning. The same tale is told in the same terms in the Avesta. Thra-Itana Taona Athwiyah killed Azeh Dahaka, the fiendish snake, the three-mouthed, three-headed, six-eyes, the most dreadful druid created by Engramenu. The scene of the battle is the four-cornered Varena, which afterwards became a country on the earth, when Thra Taona himself and Azeh became earthly kings, but which was formerly nothing less than the four-pointed Varuna, that is, the four-sided Uranas, the heavens. 13. The fight for the waters, described in the myth of later growth, a sort of refacimento, the myth of Tistria and Apaosha. Apaosha keeps away the rain, the extinguisher. Tistria worsted at first, then strengthened by a sacrifice which has been offered to him by Masta, knocks clown Apaosha with his club, the fire Vasista, and the waters stream freely down from the seven Karshvara, led by the winds and the sun of the waters, and by the light that dwells in the water. Vasista is the groaning of the fiend under the stroke of that club that is heard in the thunder. The water stream flowing down the seven waters, led by the winds, the sun of the waters, by the light that dwells in the waters. But the club thing, doesn't that make you think of like some of these Golden Dawn sort of themed Ace of Wands sort of things? The "14. The entity that conquers light is chiefly praised in the Vedas under the name of Indra Vritrahan. Indra, the fiend smiter, his Iranian brother, is named Verethragna, which became, by and by, the genius of victory. Bahram, yet, although he assumed a more abstract character than Indra, he remained the mythical features of the storm entity, and his original nature was so little forgotten that he was worshipped on earth as a fire, the Bahram fire, which was believed to be an emanation from the fire above and the most powerful protector of the land against foes and fiends. 15. In the Indo-Iranian mythology, Vayu was the word for both the atmosphere and the bright entity who fights and conquers in it. As an entity, Vayu became a Mazdaism, Vayu, a conqueror of light, a smiter of the fiends, all made of light, who moves in a golden car with sonorous rings. Ahura Mazda invokes him for help against Angramenu. 16. Another name of Vayu is Rama Havastra. The word meant originally the entity of the resting place with good pastures, the clouds in the atmosphere being often viewed as a herd of cows, and the Indian Vayu as a good shepherd. Hence came the connection of Rama Havastra with Mithra, the lord of the wide pastures. In latter times, chiefly owing to a mistake in language, Havastra being thought to be related to the root Havares, to taste, Rama Havastra became thought of as the entity who gives a good favor to ailments. 17. Considered as a thing, as the atmosphere, Vayu is the place where the entity and the fiend meet. There is therefore a part of it which belongs to the good and another part which belongs to the evil. Maybe not belongs to, but is under the influence of the evil. Hence came the latter notion that between Ormazd and Ahriman there is a void space, Va'e, in which their meeting takes place. Hence came also the distinction of the two Va'e, the good one and the bad one, which, probably by natural connection of Vayu, the atmosphere, with the heavens, whose movement is destiny, became at last the good fate and the bad fate, our destiny bringing good and evil, life and death. 18. Ase is not always vanquished. He may also conquer, and it is just because the serpent has seized upon the sky and darkened the light that the battle breaks out. Ase has carried off in the sovereign light the Havareno from Yima Kshaeta, the shining Yima, in course of time. Thra Ta'ana, Yima and Aze Dahaka became historical. It was told how King Jemshid Yima Kshaeta had been overthrown and killed by the usurper Zohak Dahaka, a man with two snake head upon his shoulders, and how Zohak himself had been overthrown by a prince of the royal blood, Feridun Thra Ta'ana. Yet Zohak, though vanquished, could not be killed. He was bound to Mount Damavand, there to lie in bonds till the end of the world, when he shall be let loose, then killed by Keras Aspa. The fiend is as long-lived, is as long-lived as the world, since as often as he is vanquished, he appears again as dark and fearful as ever. And let us remember that it's not so much myths become history, it's that myths are an arrangement of claims of history or whatever that mean something, that have some application. 19. And very often entities gradually make their way into being thought of as gods. While the serpent passed thus from mythology into legend, he still continued under another name, or more correctly, under another form of his name, Ase, a word which the Parsis converted into a pallid and lifeless abstraction by identifying it with a smaller word from the same root, meaning want. But that he was the very same being as Ase the snake appears from his adversaries. Like Ase, he fights against Atar the fire and strives to extinguish it, and together with the Ivrikas, he wants to carry off the rain floods, like the Indian Ahe. 20. Mazdaism, Mazdayasnahe Zarathustrahe, as might be expected from its main principle, Mazdayasnahe, it means the ones that God is whom they worship. God is whom their songs and their celebrations and all that are for. Is very rich in demons. Well, the fact that such and such created beings decided to corrupt his creation is not the same thing as it being, you'd have to think. Well, I mean, that second group of beliefs kind of develop into each other, but, it's not as necessary when you think of the first alone by itself. There are whole classes of them which belong to the Indo-Iranian mythology. The Vedic Yatus are found unaltered in the Avesta. The Yatu in the Vedas is the demon taking any form he pleases. Islam also believes that one of the three types of jinn is the shapeshifter. The fiend as a wizard, spirits of a place or thing, that's also mentioned. And so he is in the Avesta also, where the name is likewise extended to the Yatuban, the sorcerer. (21) With the Yatus are often associated with the Pa-Erikas, the Paris. The Pa-Erika corresponds to her origin and perhaps as to her name, to the Indian Apsaras. The light for which the storm entity struggled was often compared, as well known, to a fair maid or bride carried off by the fiend. And a third type is those entities that go to and from a place. Now, we're given gender and stuff here, and yes, jinn are beings with gender, but it's not as simple as the stellar beings, which is a way of translating Pa-Evrekas. There was a class of myths which, instead of being carried off, she was supposed to have given herself up of her own free will to the demon and to have betrayed the entity, her lover. In another form of myth, still more distinct from the naturalistic origin, the Pa-Evrekas were nymphs of a fair but erring line, who seduced the heroes to lead them to their ruin. Afterwards, the Pare became, at length, the seduction of idolatry. Then, Pa-Erikam, the accusative of Pa-Erika, was interpreted as a Pahlavi compound, Parikam, love of the Paris. And people say the term witch, but not some New Ager that just witch is some alternative religion or something. No, a witch was a witch was an entity that made a pact with the demon, but the Erikas are the female, the demonesses basically. In their oldest Avesta form, they are still demoniac nymphs who rob the entities and men of the heavenly waters. They hover between heaven and earth in the midst of the sea, Vorukasha, to keep off the rain floods, and they work together with Aze and Appa-Osha. Then we see the Pa-Evrika under the name of Kanatha Ite cleave to the Keras Aspa. Keras Aspa, like Thra E Ta'ana, is a great smiter of demons who killed the snake. Sarvara, a twin brother of Azadahaka, it was related in later tales that he was born immortal, but that having despised the holy religion, he was killed during his sleep by a Turk, Niyaz, which being translated into old myth would mean that he gave himself up to the Pa-Evrika, Knath A'ete, who delivered him asleep to the fiend, yet he must rise from his sleep at the end of time to kill Aze, and Knath A'ete will be killed at the same time by Sa'oshant, the son of Zarathustra, which shows her to be a genuine sister of Aze, and, the prophets being of the same line, you could say. Same father, different mothers, right? the father representing the principles, the different, I guess, relationship would be the other, the material culture or something. But we should remember that a very important, I did a video or so on the science of spiritual sleep or something like that, or religious sleep, or however I phrase that. Going to sleep, waking up, pre-adolescence, dying, and intoxication are states we have to be particularly careful of the influences that may direct us one way or another. 22. Then comes the host of storm fiends, the Dervants, the Devarants, the Dragvants, all names meaning the running ones, and referring to the headlong course of the fiends in storm, the onsets of the wounding crew. One of the foremost among the Drvants, their leader and their onsets is Eshma, the raving, a fiend with the wounding spear, originally a mere epithet of the storm fiend. Eshma was afterwards converted into an abstract, the demon of rage and anger, and became an expression for all moral wickedness, a mere name of Ahriman. Well, there's the 9 arc, you can say, and I remember by biblical cosmology and demonology for the pentagram, right? I've also brought a cosmology of 9 into that. Yes, you can kind of place Lilith in the side here, and her 4 sisters around, and you can do stuff like this to add in the female element, but that's, I guess, maybe a further step, maybe the Ramyumptum ritual, right? 23. A class of demons particularly interesting are the Berenya Devas. The phrase, an old one belonging to the Indo-European mythology, meant originally the shining ones in heaven. Uranioi Theoi, when the Devas were converted into demons. Well, different languages, different whatever. They became the fiends in the heavens, the fiends who assail the sky. Later on, as the meaning of the word Varena was lost, the fiends of the Varena land, and finally nowadays, as their relation to Varena is lost to sight, they are turned by popular etymology now into demons of lust, and now into demons of doubt.